So I've had a few friends ask me over the last day or two what's prompted me to do some of the posts that I have on social media, particularly Facebook, in regard to leadership issues in the church. And so I just wanted to take a few minutes here and just explain the push I've felt to put some of the things out there that I've been putting out there. And this is nothing new for me. Anybody that knows me or is familiar with my work knows that I've been on about these leadership issues for several years now. I wrote a book called UnLeader almost 10 years ago. And then most recently with Rob Wegner and Alan Hirsch, our book, The Starfish and the Spirit, we deal with a lot of these issues. But let me just go over it real quick as far as kind of what the push is. We're all familiar, or many of us are familiar with the recent podcast series by Christianity Today, The Rise and Fall of Mars Hill. Also, Julie Royce, who is an investigative reporter, basically, who has a podcast. She's done several things lately regarding Mark Driscoll and the Trinity Church. This is Mark Driscoll's second act, where it seems like he is doubling down on the things that got him kicked out of Mars Hill in Seattle, which caused a huge multi-site church to literally go down in flames in a month, to disappear in a month. Here's the deal. Over the last few years, we have seen the biggest of pastors, the most well-known pastors, go down for issues of bullying, abuse of their staff, tendencies that come from hard hierarchy. Bill Hybels, 3 years ago, went down. A year or so ago, we saw Carl Lentz from Hillsong in New York. We've seen the things about Rabbi Zacharias, Steve Timmis. Another Acts 29 leader was sacked earlier this year. Jason Meyer, the successor for John Piper's Bethlehem Baptist Church. It was just announced a few days ago that he's resigned, probably because he was asked to resign after about 3 or 4 other pastors had resigned over bullying. James McDonald out of Chicago, another bully pastor that got sacked. And of course, once again, Mark Driscoll. These leadership systems have produced thousands and thousands of pastors that work from a persona and actions and ways and means that have no sense of Jesus and the fruit of the Spirit whatsoever. And a lot of us ask, well, why does it keep happening? There needs to be more accountability, yeah. There's a lot that we can go into on that. I've written a lot about that, and we'll be doing some more videos on that stuff later on. But one of the issues, just right off the bat, is that we have replaced servantship with leadership. Leadership is only talked about maybe 5 or 6 times in the New Testament, and yet the word servant or scenarios of being a servant are dozens and over 100 times in the New Testament. It's the theme that Jesus was on about. He says, I came as one who serves. And so there's a lot that Jesus said about being a servant. Most of the hierarchy that we have in our church today is imported straight from worldly systems. And we've even created titles and we've created positions that come out of it. Our titles: senior leader, lead pastor, senior pastor. And then in the last 20 years or so, that spawned the second chair, what some people call it, the executive pastor. And I have looked at resumes of executive pastors. I've looked at the backgrounds of executive pastors. And I'm not saying this is every one of them, because there's some really good men and women out there that hold those positions, undoubtedly. But even if you go to some of the websites that are all about teaching executive pastors and training executive pastors, you will see that the criteria so often really has nothing to do with spiritual leadership. And you can look at the resumes of many executive pastors in these churches today, and you can see that they came straight out of the business or corporate world, many times having no theological training whatsoever, never being a pastor, and they are put in leadership directly over men and women that have decades, and sometimes the staff has cumulatively centuries of leadership in the church as spiritual leaders, and yet someone from the business world is come and put over them as an overlording boss, and we run our churches this way, and then we wonder why we're getting what we're getting, and why we're not making disciples. Listen, here's the reason I've been making these posts lately, and here's the reason I write what I write. You don't play around with a plague. I mean, we've just gone through, we're not even through a pandemic like none of us have seen in our lifetime. You don't play around with cancer. You go at it. You remove it. You decimate it. You attack it. You take it out. And here's the thing. Even though we see leader after leader after leader, like I've just mentioned earlier, fall, we just kind of sit around and mess around it. Kind of go, doggone. Boy, that's a shame. Wow. Boy, yeah, that podcast, what stunning stuff. And then the beat goes on. We don't change our systems. And here's the deal. Every system is perfectly designed to produce what it's producing. We're getting what we're getting because of the system of leadership that we have in our church. And until we go back to true servant leadership, until we go back to decentralized forms where people in leadership can self-manage and they can be peers and not feel like that they're under parents, and where we start moving from bossing to coaching, and we move from directing to equipping, like Ephesians 4 says that the apostle, prophet, evangelist, shepherd, and teacher are to do, is to equip others, which means to build them up and to resource. Until we change that, and until we get serious, and until we get fervent about it, we're just going to keep seeing what we're seeing. We're just going to keep getting what we've been getting. And so anyway, that's just my little quick explanation why some people think I'm ranting. It's really not a rant. It's fire in the bones, okay? Because I care about the church. I care about the body of Christ. I want to see us on about affecting this broken and more evident every day that it's a broken world. Until we get serious about listening to Jesus and obeying Him and not just playing around and diddling with it and giving excuses why we're not obeying Him, we're just going to keep getting what we're getting.